all of the other companies are thinking that the evolution, maybe the way to get to metaverse is going to be through these collaboration platforms.
You're trying to convince people with a straight face. That's what drives me nuts. With a straight face, that
It's
this
ready.
is
It's
what
ready.
you want.
It's it.
You want the Nintendo Wii to have a meeting that you could otherwise have in person, and it would be so much better. These companies want to convince you. This is the reality distortion field. They want to convince you that the metaverse is a place where you can be happier than in real life. The reality is that these companies are building the metaverse or want to build the metaverse because once you are in the metaverse and once you start to depend on being on the metaverse,
You're
then
controlled. They can control you.
no, they can sell everything to you.
Congratulations!
I read something in the news earlier this week.
Okay.
Meta. I don't know if you remember this, but for quite a few years, Meta had this enterprise version of Facebook called Workspace. And after trying in adopting this
Killed it,
thing,
right?
they killed it. Or they announced that they will kill it.
I think what Meta did, and to your point, what they were trying to do is see if they can use that to pivot to metaverse, so kind of like a stopgap until they got to a metaverse.
I never thought about that. Yeah, possible. Yeah.
But if you think about it, I mean, how the heck do you compete with like a Teams or a Zoom or some of these other platforms? Why would I even want to look at Facebook? But I always thought of this as, hey, I think, and I don't know if I'm right here, I think all of the other companies are thinking that the evolution, maybe the way to get to metaverse is going to be through these collaboration platforms. But I personally don't think that's the way forward. I mean, the whole point of a metaverse, if we're going to buy into metaverse, is the whole immersive experience, the whole, the fact that it's decentralized, the fact that, you're in this 3D world, you're merging physical and virtual. You're able, it's built on blockchain or Web 3.0. You've got your own digital currency. You're using NFTs. Like, it's a cool idea. I do believe that at some point maybe we'll get there, but I think we're years away. Years. Thoughts?
So I never thought about Workspace and other collaboration solutions as a way to get to the metaverse, quite frankly. I simply thought about them. I still think today, so I'm not sure I agree 100% with you, but it's an interesting point of view, and I'll think about it. I always thought that their solutions, and the meta one in particular, were just attempts to squeeze more advertising money from people. And the rationale of that is quite simple. This half of the planet, I think close to 3 billion people at this point, have a Facebook account and have used it, and then the sizable chunk of that is using it on a daily basis. And so people are so familiar with the brand, why not keep doing that also in the office? I think it was as simple as that, really. For motivations that are not simple, but it was as simple as that. And the problem I always had with this kind of approaches, but much earlier than that, I don't know if you remember, when Google was trying to do the social network, there was no enterprise collaboration oriented, but still he had some elements of it. Google Plus, Google
Yeah.
Plus, that I think it triggered this trend that we have today where everything has to be called Plus, which is just dreadful. But anyway, another story. And so just like in the Google Plus situation, with this meta collaboration suite, this workspace, the problem I always had is that there is no value given to the customers. There is just a company that say, hey, we do this, just use it because it's cool, because you know us, and keep using it. So I have a funny story about this. when I was working for my former employer, I was one of the very first people to sign up for this Facebook workspace because I was curious. I wanted to see what it was.
Sure.
I wanted to understand how it would work. At that point, I already stopped using. I think I was stopped using Facebook completely, but I was curious if this could be a way to have an easier intranet to share content across different business units in this big company I was working for. And so I tried, I signed up for it. And at that point, it was the wild, wild west, meaning that there was no mechanism to enroll a company yet. And the first people that would sign up for the account would automatically enroll without any permission the entire company. So I enrolled entire Red Hat into this without realizing what I was doing. And in fact, they didn't tell me. I thought I was creating an account for myself.
You did it. Nobody stopped you.
Why? No. And so at some point in time, 1 year later, 6 months later, I don't remember exactly, somebody from Meta contacted me and say, we're contacting you because you are the administrator for Red Hat for the Facebook workspace digital solution. And I was like, no, I'm not. Absolutely.
You're lying.
First of all, I don't have the authority. Second, I don't have the permission. Third, I don't have the will to do this. So absolutely not. I don't want to do this. But nonetheless, they invited me over. The VP that was in charge of that business unit, that project, that team, I don't know the structure of the Facebook
Wait, did they
organization.
tell you, hey, you're the only user of Workspace, so we want to use you to advertise this platform?
No, but they wanted to use me, and that's why they invited me to their headquarters here in London. They wanted to use me to gather feedback about the product. So they say, you are one of the first that signed up in your company for this. You used for a while. Come over, tell us what was happening. And so the VP of that platform invited me over, and I met in London. And when I sat down, as a former analyst, I gave him a long list of things that I thought would be useful to have, but
I
not
would love
just.
to be in that meeting.
Yeah, once you're an analyst, you're always an analyst, right?
That's right.
But I didn't have the cup of the analyst. I had the cup of the user. I genuinely wanted to use the product, and there were certain things that I wanted out of it. And now years have passed, so I don't remember exactly what I said, but I gave him this list, and this guy literally did not listen one single word of what I did. The Italians do this gesture, which is he enters from one ear and he comes out from the other. Now that is a different gesture.
That's a different one. Let's come out here.
he literally didn't care. Nothing of what I said registered with him. The only thing that he cared about is how can I get more people on. And the gist of my message was, what exactly are you adding for the users like me? What is the thing that is helping me to do this job?
What is the draw?
Nothing. He didn't do anything. And in fact, so true that over the next few years, the product never evolved to take on board any of the comments that I made, but not because I'm special, but because those were logical things that anybody in a large enterprise would want to make easier the collaboration between business units and break apart the insulation that typically happens between them. So this guy didn't do anything.
I agree. I agree. But so in their defense, in Facebook's defense, I understand where they're coming from. So if we go back to how they started as an exclusive community for colleges, and they were able to then roll it out to the consumers, and they've had success. And it stands to reason that, hey, why can't we implement the same thing for businesses?
But
My opinion is they probably underestimated, though, the power of their brand. Their brand sometimes is even blocked at companies. Companies don't want to intermingle people's personal with their business. I think their challenge was they should have had a different brand. They went in with Facebook. They should have had whatever XYZ powered by Facebook, geared towards business. maybe that would have been a better success.
Okay, so this is a possible interpretation. I have a different one, which is, and this is a famous expression that we use all the time, that Silicon Valley uses all the time. It's not true, and you know this because you saw that happening with cloud computing, you saw that happening
Yep.
with containers and so on. It's never true in a large enterprise, in terms of enterprise adoption, that you can say, building and they will come. They never come. They never
No,
come unless
they don't.
there is a substantial reason, some value, some significant, tangible value that is superior to the value that they already get from the established player, solution, etc. So,
But I think there is a value, right? So you brought up something, and we should talk about this at a later time, intranets. I'm still struggling with intranets to this day. I personally don't really think there's a really cool solution for intranets that's not super confusing and expensive. And for me, Facebook checks all the boxes for an intranet if it were geared towards business. So I don't want to interrupt you. I want you to finish your thought, but I just wanted to say we should talk about intranets at some point because even for my dad's small business, I can't find a really clean solution. I mean, there's Slack, there's Teams, there's a whole slew of third parties. SharePoint's, convoluted. So I see where they were going. I just don't know if execution was good.
right, so on this we agree. The reason why I started looking into their solution is exactly this, is that over the years, over the last 25 years, intranet solution have emerged and then declined and then go a little bit better, but never reached the point of maturity, frictionless level of adoption where it's so easy, it's a breeze to
Agree.
install and use. I started my career in the Windows, in the Microsoft ecosystem, and I was surrounded by fanatics of Microsoft SharePoint. So I got a lot of visibility into SharePoint. And 25 years ago, I thought SharePoint was just absolutely terrible solution. But we're not here to talk about SharePoint. So I agree with you, and that's why I started looking into it. But here's the problem: they didn't do anything that was actually helpful for the mission of the intranet. I asked them to create mechanism for one BU to identify itself and cross-pollinate to other BUs and do a bunch of things that were exactly aimed at increasing the visibility of content or simplify the consumption of content across groups that normally don't talk to each other or don't want to talk to each other, but they need to talk to each other. They need to promote each other's activities, agendas, roadmaps, and so forth. And that's the thing that was disappointing and made me lose faith in the project way before it's been shut down now. The fact that they just wanted to create the alternative of Facebook in the enterprise, and that was it. And it's a great opportunity that they completely missed, I think.
I agree. They completely missed it. I think they didn't properly assess or analyze what business needs. I don't think they positioned it correctly. I think to your earlier point, all they did was, hey, it's enough to put Facebook for business and they're going to come. And they didn't come. I do think there's a huge missed opportunity. Another missed opportunity. Imagine how many others like you they brought in, business leaders. And if they didn't listen to you, they probably didn't listen to others.
So in all fairness, the VP advertises on LinkedIn and other places I read exactly this week that the platform had some traction, had hundreds of thousands of users, which is still a drop in the ocean
Sure.
compared to the circulation of Slack or Teams. And among them there is Walmart, that is Fortune number one. And so when this person that was in charge of the project says online, if a Walmart calls you, you listen, I agree, and I'm happy to hear that. But at the same time, I can't imagine how Walmart, which is significantly bigger than the company I used to serve for, could possibly not have given the same identical feedback that I gave. So there is a lot of moving parts in this. However, that all of this said, I never thought about what you suggested, which is this was all a stepping stone of a bigger scheme that was to build up towards the ultimate reality distortion field, which is the
The
metaverse.
metaverse. So speaking of metaverse, I know where I stand on metaverse. I'm curious to see, what do you think of metaverse? I mean, when I think of metaverse, I think of the movie Real Player One.
Right.
But instead of a game, I think of that immersive experience, those interactions, the seamless interaction. I have a take that I want to share with you on how I see the metaverse, but I'm curious in yours first. How, is it all BS? Do you think we'll get there?
The thing that vendors are selling us today is BS. It is BS. When I Meta, sorry to just
No, please.
hammer on him, but when you have Meta that comes to you and shows you that the metaverse is half body floating in the space that looks like Minecraft from the 90s, if not
Yes, it
worse,
does.
and the only thing that you can do in there is to attend the meeting that you could attend in person and look at people and have a laugh together. That's so awkward and disconnected from reality. And no human being, at least not the ones I know, would ever want to trade a real life experience or even a video
For that.
call for that. You're gonna put the visor, and I understand, we understand better than anybody else that these are the early stages of this, so that a lot of this technology will have to mature, and that the visors are heavy, heat up, and they are cause discomfort, all these things, that the bodies will get better and so on. But the point is always the same, like we said in the previous episode. The point is that you're trying to convince people with a straight face, that's what drives me nuts, with a straight face, that
It's
yeah,
ready.
this
It's
is what
ready.
you want.
It's it.
You want the Nintendo Wii to have a meeting that you could otherwise have in person, and it would be so much better. It's
It,
just,
it I love that. We're gonna be a Mario in a Nintendo 64 or a Nintendo Wii.
I had a Nintendo Wii. That's the only reason why I know that those characters look like the Nintendo Wii characters.
You know, before this whole AI craze happened, if you rewind, I don't know, a year and a half ago, and you watched this, it's funny. I watched the Satya keynote from 2 years ago. I think it was Ignite. And the whole conversation back then was on custom silicon, but it was also about immersive experience and augmented reality and real world applications of things that eventually will come together to create this metaverse. But as opposed to Meta, and we're harping on Meta, let's let's hit Microsoft a little bit. I thought the Microsoft stuff was really well done, albeit they were a little decentralized. They hadn't come together. But if you looked at, some of the use cases, some of the examples they gave of how you can potentially use augmented reality, how you could use something like a metaverse for training purposes, et cetera, et cetera. I liked what I saw. I thought this had real world application. I thought it was doable, possible. Um, so I kind of liked where they were going. I haven't looked at the messaging, how that messaging evolved, but AI kind of overshadowed so much that I don't think anyone's hearing anything today other than AI. So I say all of this because I do think there's some applications, some components of the metaverse. Again, if we consider that the ultimate metaverse is something like the movie Real Player One, I think we are building components that could potentially contribute to that. But we're years away. We're 10 plus years away from even getting to anything similar.
so we are years away, and potentially we are also away in terms of how this will play out. And I will explain what I mean in a second. But before I get to that, I want to say that we are incentives away. If the large majority of companies are trying to build, and that includes Microsoft, Meta, Google, and everybody else, are trying to to build so this is the problem. This is the problem I have with the metaverse. On top of the fact that it's completely vaporware as we stand now. And I'm sorry for all the chief metaverse officers that are listening to this podcast, but it's just what it is. I don't even know
It's the truth.
why they were hired for. Or better, I think I know, and that's where I'm going. So these companies want to convince you, this is the reality distortion field, they want to convince you that the metaverse is a place where you can be happier than in real life.
That's right.
Perhaps because you don't have to commute, perhaps because you don't have to show your aspect. Think about people that might have a disability or feel ashamed for whatever reason.
Yep.
People
could
that
be
don't
whoever you
feel nothing wrong with any of this,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
they might not feel comfortable with themselves, and so they don't want to necessarily show their face, their aspect, and so on. So this is another enabler for all of that. Or people that fear bias towards them, maybe because they're not white entitled men, or because they are not the right gender, or whatever is the reason. So the metaverse giving you this capability to mod or reskin reality
Abstract. Yeah.
gives you that sense of comfort that you might miss in real life. So this is the second reason. A third reason to be happy is that, okay, so you don't have to commute, you don't have to show your aspect, you can learn better or faster, which is the example that you provided, right? So I have a full simulation of whatever Microsoft showed years ago, so Formula One car, I'm a mechanical engineer, I can learn better how the engine works and all the other wonderful things and so forth.
Yep.
All of this is great things, but the reality is that these companies are building the metaverse or want to build the metaverse because once you are in the metaverse and once you start to depend on being on the metaverse,
You're
then
controlled. They can control you.
no, they can sell everything to you.
Yeah.
Everything is
They own you.
synthetic. So you can buy, or you are enticed to buy, or you can brainwashed to buy absolutely anything. And that means
Anything.
profit out of thin air. How do I know this? Why did I come to this conclusion? I saw my daughter, a teenage daughter, I saw my daughter growing up with Roblox, which, by the way, is, in my opinion, one of the very few companies that actually has a shot at building the metaverse as it's supposed to be, as it is in your mind. So I saw her playing with Roblox and going through the years, 10 years, 12 years, 13 years, 14 years, and every time she would change the way she would use it and the things she would do in those games, mini virtual worlds. And she got to a point where I started to see an obsession, not from her, but from other players, to buy and sell for profit, but mostly to buy digital goods that don't necessarily represent the real thing. So the example that comes to mind is the shoes from a fashion brand like Gucci or Prada or whatever. So you do
They
with
become
the
attractive inside the game now, all of a sudden.
right. So you create the digital version of that. You make a limited edition. People like it. They want to improve the aspect of the avatar, and they buy it. They have money. They buy it. But it's more than that. I've seen people in Roblox buying random stuff, non-branded stuff, just because they wanted a nicer cup. And so anybody, or glittering hair, or whatever it was. And so the designer that could build those things, that could sell to thousands or hundreds of thousands of millions, all of a sudden has an incentive to stay in the metaverse, or in the virtual world, let's call it that way for now. And the other people start to be dependent on that because they put efforts, they put a mechanism of social recognition, and maybe even a social status increase because of those things that they are using. So why in the world would they want to go back to the real world where maybe they don't have such a high status, where they are not recognized?
It's the same as kind of with what Facebook is today. A lot of people spend, at least in the earlier stages, they spent hours on Facebook. They posted pictures of what they're doing. Most of them didn't do anything like the stuff that you see, the reality that you see on Facebook never matched the reality of, in the real world. And I think this would pretty much take it to the next level. But it could also be used for control purposes. Think of what governments can do, what dictatorships can do. I mean,
Yeah.
even democracies. I mean, you have the ability to message the way you want, control the way you want, access the way you want, control digital currency the way you want, manipulate the way you want. Um,
So,
it's
so there
great
is
on the
there
one
is
side, it's very dangerous on the other side.
There is no question about that. And the same identical argument can be made for generative AI and large language models, which
Yeah.
could talk at another point. But and yes, you can have, once you are in there are mechanisms that apply also in the real world in terms of marketing exposures and brainwashing and peer
Oh
pressure and
yeah.
all these things that would convince you in an easier way to buy that product or to vote for
Yeah.
that candidate or to think about this value but not that value or that person but not that person. All of this is true. But I think that this is a lot of sophisticated thinking beyond what most companies want to think about.
Mm.
Companies are always, I repeat this ad nauseum, companies are always made of people. They are not abstract entities. And so when we assign to a company this exceptional strategy skill, this capability to see 10 moves ahead and plan for world domination, it means that there is a bunch of people that's sitting in the cubicles or the offices or whatever that have the capability to think. And after 25 years, I didn't see very many people like that. So I'm more inclined to believe, no offense for anybody, I'm more inclined to believe that this is simple misplaced incentives, as always, which is how can we increase the revenue of the company through advertising, because that's a proven model. And so how can we place humans into a place where they buy more? We put them in a place where we can extract profit out of thin air. This is the ultimate revenue generator, because you can create whatever you want and people, if you move the right levers, are going to buy. This is the real reason for the metaverse that we heard and we saw pushed until now. Nobody will convince me of any different than that. It's just
It's always
impossible.
about money. It's always about revenue. I don't know if they know where to go anymore, right? So there are, and again, this is why I keep going back to this. You rewind 2 years ago, the whole conversation was about immersive experiences, and everybody was doing it, right? And the irony in that is even Nvidia, the king of AI chips, got bought into this whole metaverse stuff. They have the Omniverse, right? Do you even hear about the freaking Omniverse anymore? Like, I don't know when the last time I saw the Omniverse, but if you rewind about a year and a half or 2 years ago, that's the only thing that Nvidia was talking about was the Omniverse. But to your point, because they found a different shiny object, something else to fill the gap of revenue that they were looking for, priorities shift
I, th-
immediately.
I think that the NVIDIA has a slightly different goal when it comes to well, has two goals when it comes to the metaverse or the omniverse, as they used to call it. I don't know if they still call it in this way. So if you hear if you heard the last keynote, um, they are putting a lot of emphasis on a notion that existed for a very long time, I think over a decade, the digital twin. So let us replicate the real world into a simulated virtual
Yep.
environment so that you can test manufacturing processes,
Yep.
construction techniques, uh, also, or human interactions at large scale. All of these things are really hard to test in real life in a way that is controlled, that can allow a lot of different scenarios and so forth. So they're not driven clearly by the desire to extract profit from thin air by selling advertising on or selling synthetic goods. They are driven by how can I convince companies that they need more on my GPUs? Well, one way is that to tell them that they need to have a perfect replica or of London or Chicago or whatever, New York or whatever place it is. So that's a slightly different take. But it is possible that that is a stepping stone
Towards.
towards a complete replica of the planet, and once that replica is complete, then can enable different kind of revenue models or in general business strategies. Yeah.
So you took words literally right out of my mouth. First of all, I personally hope we never get to a day where we have a perfect replica of the whole world, because at that point we've built the matrix. I mean, I know it sounds cheesy, but that's the reality. But nonetheless, I agree with what you said. So I think with the Omniverse, or at least what NVIDIA is doing, and to some degree what Microsoft is doing, is very use case specific. And I like the idea of a digital twin, because you can apply it to pretty much everything, right? I mean, the examples that Microsoft had shown and given was, you could put the HoloLenses on. I think they're called HoloLenses. And a surgeon in the US or in London or whatever, a specialized surgeon, would be able to help another surgeon in maybe an underdeveloped
Right.
country do a surgery that maybe he or she is not skilled to do. I love that application of it. Here's another more simplistic application. You and I both worked at Gartner for a long time. One of the things that we either trained or we helped others train was simple things like, hey, get on stage and present. And getting on stage and presenting, you can present in front of a mirror all day long. It's not the same as when you are in front of an audience. The energy is different, you react differently, etc. So imagine if there was a way for us to put on some kind of a wearable, I don't want to specify what, and get in front of an AI generated audience that is able to react to everything I'm saying, whether I'm saying a funny joke or a silly joke, maybe have some noise in the audio, like simulate an audience that is reacting to the content that I am presenting, which would help me then understand how I would do. Do I need to tweak things? Am I connecting with my audience? How will this come out? Like, these are real world applications that can go from very, very basic and simple to very, very complicated, and they enhance our lives. So that's where I would hope companies would focus on, is that digital twin, that augmented reality, so to speak, that gives us these options, because they could do a lot of those today.
So I agree with you on everything. I agree with you on everything. We both spoke on stage for most of our careers, so of course that is a great example I relate to. But any of that is the metaverse. That's what I contend. These things can exist as virtual reality applications.
Yes.
That are a room that does one thing and that's it. That's not my interpretation. That's not my interpretation of the metaverse. My interpretation of the metaverse is a full-scale digital world where you have interactions, you have a job, you have currency, as you said at the beginning. You have a digital
An
economy,
apartment, a house. They were selling real estate, digital real estate.
Yes, and they did for a while, selling through Bitcoin or Ethereum. They sold pieces of virtual land, which is extracting money from thin air. That's exactly a good example. That's my interpretation of the metaverse. The other use cases that you described can take place in the metaverse, but the metaverse is not essential for them to exist. I can just put on the Vision Pro, the Apple Vision Pro, and perform remote surgery, which was in the news 2 days ago, 3 days ago, whatever, or all the other things, the prep to go speak at TED and all the other wonderful things. I don't need a metaverse. I don't need a digital life. I don't need synthetic currency. I don't need all of these things. And this is the point. This is exactly the point. The point is that selling the metaverse as a fundamental, a requirement to unlock those use cases is reality distortion field. It's not true that you need those things. So if a company, any company, wants to say we want to enable the metaverse, you have to tell me something more than those use cases. You need to give me a reason for wanting to go into this digital world and spend most of my time in there. Now, that said, there is something I really want to say that you trigger with the previous comment, and it's this. This is gonna sound outlandish and it's gonna be terrible, but I don't think Matrix is cheesy at all. I always thought that we
We
are.
might even be living in a matrix. Who knows?
Okay, I don't want to go. I don't want to go too
Let's not
philosophical
go
on
that
that.
far.
That's too much. Now, I want to see something simpler, which is I believe simpler, maybe. I believe that we are inevitably attracted to information consumption. We want to consume information. Now, as high quality information is crap, like the how do they call it? The scroll of death, the doom scrolling, whatever it is. Is that something useful or not? It doesn't matter. The brain wants to process information, and increasingly so, the more we can feed the brain, the more the brain wants to look at things, to the point that since the arrival, you know this very well, since the arrival of the smartphones with the iPhone, we stop talking to each other at a pub or at a restaurant, and we rather look at the phone. Why? Because the other person is not providing enough information to feed us, or maybe the information is not particularly interesting. What smartphones have done is highlighting in a painful way how boring we are. But if there is something to each other, but if there is something that is less boring, which is I'm going to go and find information, whatever it is, it's just given to me as a torrent, I'll keep consuming. Now, if this is true, and you can consume information in a digital world, this metaverse, where you can have the aspect you want, you can be as rich as you want, you can be as successful as you want, because everything is tailored around whatever is your dream. Who in the world will go back in the real world to be bored to death by their friends, or to do a miserable job, or to wear clothes that he or she doesn't like, or to live in a terrible life? Why would you choose that life? What is that life to you? And maybe there are great answers to this, but I'm a little bit skeptical about that, and I believe that the large majority of people, given the choice, would stay in the metaverse if the metaverse would be done in a different way than the BS we've been told so far.
I agree with you. And if we go back to The Matrix, I think it was the first movie. What was the name of that? The guy that became a traitor met with the agent Smith and said, "Hey, I want you to put me back in the Matrix, and I want to be rich, and
Right,
whatever."
right.
So I agree with that. But and I didn't want to go there, but hey, we're chatting over some drinks. I also feel like the metaverse is a representation of what's going on in our social lives today. Whether it's the identity politics, and I don't want to get in, I don't want to make this political, but it's a fact. Whether it's identity politics, whether it's the gender issues, whether all of these controversial topics that we are dealing with, where pretty much everything goes these days, right? There's no barrier on anything. This generation is also making its way into these companies, and as a result is suggesting products that reflect what they imagine the world to be. And I feel like at some point it's a clash of generations. Like, I believe, at least, and I'm not going to speak for you, but I believe our generation had a little bit of a different approach to some of these topics. Personally, I disagree with a lot of them, but that's, I don't judge, just my personal opinion. But then when you look at what they're trying to accomplish with metaverse, it is another way of challenging the reality, the fundamentals, the foundations of everything that we know to be real.
It's a possibility that there are powerful forces that are influencing the direction of technology companies, and they have an agenda that goes beyond the monetization that have been complaining about so far. It is absolutely possible. I don't want to go too deep into that, not because it's not a real problem. For example, I could talk for hours about this topic when it comes to its application to artificial intelligence, generative AI in particular. But in the particular case of the metaverse, I didn't see yet enough to feed speculation, and I don't want to go into conspiracy theories and other things. Is he a plausible theory? Absolutely yes. Is he something that's actually happening? I don't know. I didn't have enough to go by, but it's not unthinkable that governments would really like to have even more control on the life of the people. Not necessarily mostly democratic nations, but certain authoritarian governments would love to lock people's life in a digital world where everything they do can be controlled easier, cheaper than in the real life. So yes.
And see, as much as I like the bang on governments and politics, in this case, I'm not sure governments are driving this. I think the social movement is driving this. But I gotta go in a little bit. So I wanna pick your brain on one more thing with regards to metaverse, because it's, since we started talking, it's been in the back of my mind. Metaverse meets AI, and I don't think, maybe there are folks that are talking about it. But what if AI will help build this metaverse?
Yeah,
And
100%.
not today's version of AI, right? Maybe, I don't know, 6 months, 8 months, 12, 18 months from now, when AI is a little more sophisticated. What if AI, and I don't mean it in a malicious way, I just mean, what if AI starts to contribute to building the constructs of this metaverse?
So AI is actually already being considered to build the metaverse, just not in multiple ways. And one of them is a different execution of the idea. The execution of the idea that we're all familiar with is the one of the Ready Player One that you mentioned before.
Yeah.
And it's, you put on the visor, and then you that is your gateway towards infinite adventures. There is another alternative approach to this. Probably there are more, but there is an alternative approach to this. And this idea is the idea of the holodeck that comes from my beloved Star Trek, the Next Generation TV series.
Man, you're like sitting in my mind. I want, this is at the beginning, I told you I have my own idea. I was gonna go there, but I'm gonna let you finish, and then I'll tell you what I'm thinking of that.
And so so first of all, we need to be realistic. There is a lot of things about the holodeck that are
Sure.
probably unfeasible, or if feasible, they are decades away. But there are like the capability to touch or feel the touch of an object that materializes is just, I don't even know if it's possible doing. But the visuals, what you see, the creation, or better, the generation of a world that is projected in all directions on four walls, ceiling, and floor, that is something that generative AI has unlocked now. Two things are happening. The first one is that we're getting faster and faster and faster at generating realistic content. And if you want one company to look at that is at the forefront, that has the most chances to build the holodeck, that is Midjourney. And the CEO of Midjourney has made no secret that they have, among the other things, that kind of ambition. The second thing is that there are a bunch of startups in the hardware space that are trying to build, now that generative AI has enabled this possibility, they are trying to build mechanisms so that you can create a whole room that can project or display in a coordinated fashion across all the displays, including the ceiling and the floor, the image generated by whatever AI generation is. And one of the coolest things that we're seeing recently comes from the R&D lab of Disney. I don't know if you saw this in the news. They have created this mat that is basically sliding in place. It it makes you walk in place, which is something that we never had before. We had other implementations, and I'm not going to spend lots of time talking about them. But this mat is flat. It's still very small for now. They need to figure out how to make it faster and silent and build at a scale in a way that is economically sustainable. But basically, you can walk on this thing, and you are permanently in a completely free move. You're not constrained in any way.
But that's another thing from Ready Player One. He in the movie he was on a treadmill like device.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and that was one of the first implementation that came in a few years ago. But this is slightly different because these are no constraint. You don't have to strap your body with anything. And if they can implement that in a way that it can completely fill the floor of this holodeck room, and he can even project things, so be a display, not just a moving mat, then you don't need the visor anymore. That's where I'm going. So,
Well, so I wanted to go there, but slightly different. So I was going to say, what if we stop focusing on the metaverse from the visor perspective or a wearable perspective and flip the script a little bit? You know, you sit in your car today, the newer cars, and there are holographic displays on the windshield, right? You can see
right,
speeds, you can see maps, etc.
yeah.
What if that is another implementation of the metaverse on a larger scale? What if we equip buildings and streets and lights and everything with this type of technology that can, as you're walking, it's projecting information
Okay,
that you can
so
use, you know? So not completely that immersive experience, but hey, I have everything I need. Enable that virtual world so I can interact with it without having to do anything or wear anything.
Okay, so this is an interesting idea. What you're saying, basically, if I understood this correctly, is that rather than have a separate space, which is the metaverse, where people go into, the metaverse is a superimposed reality on top of the real
Exactly.
reality. Okay.
Maybe a couple of drones that are hovering around the city that superimpose a wireframe or some ideas of it.
Right, so that is one of the many implementations. There are others that hopefully are, well, not necessarily better, but another implementation that I follow for quite a few years because of my other research project that is called H+, is what they're called smart contact lenses. So the notion of a visor in the contact lens, and that can do similar thing. Now, it's an interesting idea, and there is nothing that prevents that superimposition to be the incarnation, the implementation of the metaverse. The part where I'm not so sure is if the metaverse is about digital currency, that works, yes. If it's about social interaction, what is the social interaction? So yes, you can receive a message that is in front of your visor, or the drone projects in places, but it's not quite like seeing another person. So if this drones could project a hologram of another person that walks with you in the streets of the real world, then yes. But without that social component, that presence, I would say that physicality, but it's not physical, it's virtual. I'm not sure that we have all the ingredients to do a metaverse. It's an interpretation that it's absolutely valid, yeah.
We covered a lot of deep topics today.
But the point is of all of this, regardless of when it will come, is that we are millions of miles away from all of these things that we're saying. What we have right now is Mark Zuckerberg that is telling us that we need to float like Quiz to go to a meeting that is half an hour away, commuting by car. Why in the world we've been sold this? And who's buying this? Who's buying into this vision? I have no idea.
Well, so I mean, I should have found the exact quote, and this is not fair to mention, but I'm going. You know, we're chatting, so I'll tell you this. You know, our former employer is also kind of guilty of this. Again, I think at some point before AI came along, everyone ran out of content. Like there was a prediction, I believe, from a Gartner analyst that by 2026, 1 in 4 people would be using the metaverse. and it boggled my mind. I'll find it. If I find it, I'll send it to you. We'll put a link to it. It boggled my mind because I mean, here's a company who's we did a lot of great research. And look, we get some things wrong, we get some things right. I get it. No one's perfect, but when you make a prediction like that as the inventor of the hype cycle, I mean that's the majority of what you do. My point is, everyone bought into this hype, and I think everyone bought into it because they ran out of things to talk about. Cloud became old. They were starting to dabble with custom silicon. Metaverse was that, hey, that shiny new object that we could all make money off of selling what it can be and what it can do. And I think everybody was guilty of jumping onto that bandwagon.
There is so many things we could say about industry research firms, including our former employer.
We should talk about that soon.
And probably we should have an episode just about that, because there's plenty of reality distortion fields that happen there. But as you said, for every, not just Gartner, every industry research firm, like in any group of people, there are people that are really good, really qualified with great insights, and people that are not. And people tend to think about Gartner or Forrester or IDC as companies, as always, and not as aggregations of people. So you think that the quality is even, and it's not. There are some people that are more capable, people that are less capable. The company should do everything in their power to maintain a certain standard of quality, so that at least there is coherent, right? But it doesn't happen. It didn't happen. And the reality is that finding good analysts is quite hard. And now, you can or you could contain the risk of bad research if you would stay away entirely from prediction. Humans are terrible at prediction. Forecasting should never happen. This has been proven by academic research, not industry research. Academic research, over and over and over and over. Humans are crap at doing forecasts.
Yeah, but it's a attention grabber. It'll make headlines. So
okay, so that leads us to where you were going, which is
that's right.
We both know, and certainly Gartner and IDC and Forrester know too, and all the others I didn't mention, that humans are terrible at doing forecasts, even with all the data in the world. And yet we keep doing it because it sells.
Clickbait, yeah.
It sells because humans, the consumers of that research, all of us,
they want it.
We have this craving desire to be in control of the situation. This is ingrained in us since by natural selection. So there is no chances for us to do otherwise. We need to be in control. And they know that they can leverage that desire, that primal desire, by focusing on whatever the latest and the greatest technology and say, this is the prediction. There is no accountability. There is no consequences for a bad prediction. I remember, and this happened after I left the company, so we're talking about over a decade ago, I remember seeing one of those forecasts where what was the name of the Microsoft phone when they were doing the hardware device? It was called Windows Phone. So there was a researcher, and I know that researcher very well personally, and that researcher published their research that said, by year such and such, Windows Phone, or whatever was the name, will have, 40% of the market share. And I read this thing and I say, are you out of your mind? But I'm not talking to the researcher. I'm talking about all the people that did the peer review of that thing and did not stop it. You know this, and I know this.
Well, we're going to talk about this topic. We have to talk about it. I think it'll be fun.
When it was the time to do the 7 layers of peer review, where were you? Why didn't you stop that crazy thing from being published? This is the reality distortion field.
And now, a message from our sponsor.
The truth shall set you free.